now is the time to sign up. We're only taking testimony on agenda items, but we are taking oral testimony. If anybody did want to sign up, it needs to be done before the meeting starts.
Can I ask a question? Now, is that for just tonight, or will that be a continuum?
Since we're back in normal meetings, we're going to try and get back to a normal, functioning meeting. That's our plan anyway. But it kind of depends on how the world rolls.
Yeah. So
we'll try and put that at the bottom of the agenda.
Okay.
If we say no written testimony, or no oral testimony will be taken, then you'll know that. If we don't say that, then we will be taking.
Okay. Very good.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. It does.
Great. Okay. I want to be clear if we can. We don't want to confuse people. That's not a goal. But speaking of that, great. And you'll need to put your so Brian, you're going to want to be on D1, I think. D1. So it'll be section D on number 1. Okay, well, I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. We don't need to take roll because everybody's here, which is just really fun, and it's also fun to see everybody's faces. So thank you all, everybody here, for getting vaccinated, because if I'm seeing your face, that means you're probably vaccinated. Great to have you here. We will go ahead and start the meeting off with the Pledge of Allegiance, which we also haven't done in a long time. So if we would all stand.
I like this. Where is the flag?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everybody that in the Boise School District we have certain core values, and those values are, and we conduct our meetings with such, they are respect, dignity, honesty, responsibility, and teamwork. So we will follow in that methodology. We will go ahead and move on to consent agenda items. Are there any consent agenda items that a trustee would like to pull from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion. Trustee Gregory.
President Wagers, I move approval of the consent agenda outlined in enclosures 1 through 14.
1 through 14. Is there a second? Second from Trustee Greeley. So it's been moved and seconded to approve consent agenda items 1 through 14. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We will go ahead and move on to reports and recommendations, and we'll start with the Roosevelt bid. And I believe there is a protest on this, and I'm going to go ahead and who's going to testify from the district to start out with? Mr. Skinner.
Good evening, trustees. It's nice to see you back in person. I think we're all somewhat relieved to be living life a little bit more normally. We have a bid protest for you today, Mr. President and board trustees. Short story, we're talking about the Roosevelt Gym. It's a $2.5 million project, roughly, based on the values of the bids. One of the bids that we received was the apparent low bidder from EKC Construction. I have provided with you with a recommendation from us that identifies that information. Particular to that bid, sorry about that, subcontractors who are going to do any kind of HVAC, mechanical, electrical work need to be listed on a bid. Their license has to be included, and that license has to have the appropriate qualification through the state. Those qualifications are done by value. If I'm a particular class of contractor, then I can do a certain amount of work valued up to a max amount of dollars. In this instant, the apparent low bidder had listed Copperhead Electric, which had a license that only allowed it to do work up to $50,000. Because the presumption, frankly, coming from us, that the electrical work would be done together with all the materials that are provided, we knew that that value was much more than $50,000, probably more like 150 to 250, somewhere in that zone. Under Idaho code, it is illegal for us to accept a bid with a license that is invalid, and it is also illegal for the general contractor to accept a bid from a subcontractor that does not have a valid license. So because of those two things, we determined that the bid was deemed non-responsive. Idaho code basically says that if any of the subcontractors do not have the appropriate license at the time the bid is submitted to us, it's not at the time the contract is awarded, it's the time that we receive the bid, then it is deemed to be non-responsive and we go to the next highest bidder. That's what we did. I believe it was on our consent agenda last time. We chose to award this bid based on that analysis to the second highest bidder. And since then, we have received a bid protest from that first lowest bidder, EKC Construction. Particular to that process, we put it on hold. We don't award the bid to Hedrick Construction, which is number 2. We allow you to review the process. We allow EKC to appear and present to you if they wish. They have submitted a written letter that explains their rationale. I believe that Mr. Ellsworth is here from that company. And then you are allowed to, and it's a little loose, frankly, but the statute says that you are allowed to proceed as you deem to be in the district's best interests. I would caution you that that is not a green light. If we have a situation where we have an illegal bid and we award a contract to that bidder, the next lowest person has the opportunity to sue us. So while we can proceed in what we deem to be the best interest, we still would be subject to potential litigation if either of the parties chose to challenge our analysis here. I would note that we did run this through the state, the Division of Building Safety. Wow, this is sensitive. We just informed them of the process. And we had some conversations back and forth with EKC. We understood what their position was. We ran that through state, and state said, unless EKC informed us on the front end that they were going to split out the work from the materials, which I think is what you'll hear about today, then we were appropriate in our analysis and that the bid was non-responsive. The presumption or the assumption, I believe, in common business trade is that when we receive a bid for electrical materials, that bidder or that electrical contractor is going to show up with the lights that they're going to install. If they're going to not show up in that manner, based on the communications that we have with the state, that should have been identified for us on their bid. So because that information was not identified, the state believes that we have analyzed this correctly and that they were non-responsive. I think if Mr. Ellsworth would like to address you, I would allow him, and I would ask that I get the last word.
Oh, one moment, Mr. Skinner. So, trustees, any questions for Mr. Skinner at the moment? No? Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Ellsworth? If you'll give your whole name and position, just so we have that for the record.
Yeah, my name is Brian Ellsworth, and I'm the owner of EKC Construction. So, Board of Trustees, thanks for having me here tonight to present our way of thinking about this in our case, I guess. So, first of all, we work very hard. Our staff works hard to present to you the lowest responsive bid. So, a lot of hours go into that, a lot of work goes into that, and then, of course, we have to build the project. So, there's a lot that goes into it, and we don't take these things lightly, and we try and do the best we can to provide a low responsive bid to you guys. So we prepared the bid. In this case, we believe that we are the low responsive bid with Copperhead Electric doing the labor for the project for $50,000. And EKC buying the electrical components for the project. So that's our position. At the time of the bid, we did not know that we had a potential problem with Copperhead Electric. We didn't know that. It was after someone at the bid table mentioned that Copperhead Electric had a D license and his license would not cover the appropriate amount for the electrical work, which was in Copperhead's bid to us $154,365. So what's the remedy? So we learned about this, and I went back and read the state statute, and after reading the state statute, we determined that we could go back to Copperhead and ask him to tell us what the labor was going to be and what the electrical components were going to be, or the material. So he came back to us and split the bid. I have that in front of me. He can do the labor, perform the work for $50,000. So he's within his D license to perform that work. We can, and we do all the time, buy components for projects. As a matter of fact, a lot of times light fixtures are provided by owner or other, or bought by general contractor. Concrete's another example. Sometimes we take turnkey bids for concrete where concrete contractor, he'll provide the ready mix and the rebar. Other times, we'll just take a labor bid for that, and we'll buy the ready mix and we'll buy the rebar. We buy it all the time. Division 8's another good example. We'll take bids from a door company, and sometimes we perform the labor, sometimes we do turnkey with a door company and they'll perform the labor and material. When we bid a project, oftentimes we don't know on bid day how we're going to contract with a material supplier or a subcontractor. A lot of that work's done after bid day, between the time that we receive a notice to proceed and the time that the work's actually performed, where we subcontract with a material supplier or a subcontractor. And that whole process is called buyout. And during buyout, we'll try and maybe correct a problem that we had on bid day, which would be this case. Maybe try and increase our profit margin, maybe try and cover something that we forgot on bid day. So there's all sorts of things that go on between the time that we bid a project and the time we actually perform the work. So in this case, we didn't know how we were going to contract with that electrical contractor. Our assumption is that we would do turnkey, but when we found out that his license was $50,000, we went back to him, he broke it out. I would not be standing here before you today if his labor bid came back and it was $65,000. I wouldn't be here. We would have lost and Hedrick would be doing the work. But he can perform the work within his license. So I think that we are in compliance with the state statute the way that I read it. I think it actually would be interesting to find out. It's a little bit of a gray area, and it might take a couple attorneys coming together with a judge and saying, you know, what does happen in this case? It's the first time in 25 years that I've run into it. Now, I did talk to Adriana at Department of Public Safety, and she did tell me that, you know, there were two remedies to this. One is that if there were federal dollars involved at all in this project, then the subcontractor does not need the appropriate license till he performs the work. So that was one thought that I had, is, are there federal dollars in this project? Any federal dollars, and then that subcontractor doesn't need that license on bid day. He needs the license before he performs the work. My understanding is that's not the case for Roosevelt Gym. So the other remedy was to have him split the work and do labor and material, which he did. And again, had he come back at $65,000 for labor, I wouldn't be standing here. So I guess with all that said, we still feel like we're the low responsive bidder in this case. And we would like to do the work on Roosevelt Gym for you guys. And that's all. Any questions?
Okay, yeah, are there any questions for Mr. Ellsworth? No. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it.
As soon as I sat down, I realized that I was remiss to mention a couple of things. One is Brian Ellsworth helped teach me how to cross-country and telemark ski about 25 years ago. And I went on a bunch of hut trips in the Sawtooths with him, so he is an old friend, I should say that. And also, because Boise is a small town, Scott Hedrick, who is the number 2 bidder, who was awarded this contract last board meeting, is a former client of mine. I represented him in a construction litigation lawsuit about 6 or 8 years ago when I was formerly in private practice. I would just let you know so you understand that there are those connections out there. My apologies for not mentioning that on the front end. I'm going to be very brief with respect to Brian, Mr. Ellsworth. The statute's pretty clear on this stuff relative to what he has just shared with us. The operative time at which the license must be valid is at the time the bid is submitted. Idaho code is very clear. It's 672310, subsection 7. It says, at the time the subcontractors are named in accordance with the provisions of this section, they must possess the appropriate license. So the operative moment at which this mattered was when that bid was submitted to us. And the subsection just before that in the same code section basically says that the failure to name a subcontractor with that appropriate license renders the bid unresponsive. So I would stand by our analysis. Any questions at all?
Trustee Oz.
Question was EKC, did they list itself as doing any potential electrical work on this bid?
No, and frankly, I don't think that they would have to if all they were going to do was provide the materials. And I think that was that question that we ran through the state. If they would have identified to us that Copperhead on the front end at that time was only going to do $50,000 worth of labor and they were going to then provide the materials, you don't need the appropriate license to provide the materials, only the labor, the work. So they would not have needed an underlying electrical contract from AKC or for EKC from the state. EKC, yeah, sorry.
Any other questions for trustees? Trustee Gregory.
Mr. Skinner, I will work on the assumption, you can let me know if I'm correct on this, that at bid time, that's kind of like the critical point, that when we allow differences to be resolved after the bid process, that's when we get into potential suits and litigations by other bidders who wanted an equal opportunity to adjust. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. At the operative time for the bids on state-funded projects or projects that we're funding is the moment the bid is submitted. As mentioned by Mr. Ellsworth, if it's a federally funded contract, it's a later date. But for this situation, it's the moment the bid is submitted.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So I think the way we have to go through this process, we will need a motion based on the bid protest, whether to accept it or deny it, and then we'll go through and award the bid after that we accept or deny the bid protest. So the chair would entertain a motion.
President Wagers.
Trustee Greeley.
Thank you, President Wagers. For me, the legality seems pretty clear in this, so I would like to move approval of the district's recommendation to the low responsive bid from Scott Hedrick Construction.
I think we still need to vote on the protest first.
Deny the bid.
Yeah, so we have to. So you would say to dismiss the protest.
Okay.
That's
So dismiss the protest, and that's a separate,
that'll be 2 motions. Yeah.
okay.
Okay. Is there a second? Second from Trustee Esty. Discussion from the trustees? Trustee Gregory.
President Wagers, I guess, I feel, having been on the facilities committee for a number of years and also participated in the process of determining how we were going to go about spending our bond money and spread our work across different construction managers and spread the opportunities across as many providers out in the trades as we possibly could. I also recognize that our folks, they have to run a pretty tight ship because we are dealing with a whole community full of contractors, and we have a lot of work to be done. but we have an obligation to them in terms of a trust factor and to our patrons in terms of following the law, doing what's legally required, et cetera. So I'll be supporting this motion, and we can encourage Mr. Ellsworth and his company to move forward, lesson learned. Because altering or bringing information after the bid opening is not acceptable business practice. So that's my point of view.
Thank you, Trustee Gardner. Any other discussion?
President Wagers,
Trustee Langley?
I would just note that Mr. Ellsworth made a compelling argument about how his company tried to rise to the challenge of having found that out after the bid was submitted and finding a way to comply. But unfortunately, the law is so clear on how we as an organization have to deal with it to be in compliance with the state that even though I'm very impressed by the way that Mr. Ellsworth and his organization tried to fit within the guidelines, it was after the bid was submitted, and of his own admission, the bid was submitted thinking that they had the correct license. And so I will also be aligning with this motion.
Thank you, Trustee Langley. Any other discussion, trustees? Okay, hearing none, we'll have a vote. All in favor of, so this would be denying the bid protest or dismissing the bid protest? You have a question? Point of order?
One action item for it. And so I'm just trying to get clarification.
We'll split it into a two-part motion. So, let's see, I'll need you to rescind your previous motion, and we'll have to take a vote on that, and then we'll have to redo it into a two-part motion.
I move to rescind my previous motion.
Is there a second on the rescinding of the previous motion? Second. Second from Trustee Haas. All in favor of rescinding the previous motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Previous motion has been rescinded. Would you like to try on the two-part motion, Trustee Greeley?
For sure. President Wagers. I move to, so are we rejecting the bid protest? Move to reject the bid, dismiss the bid protest and approve the district recommendation of the bid to the low response bid from Scott Hedrick Construction.
Second from Trustee Esty. Any discussion on the new motion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Ellsworth, for both your bid and your testimony. We appreciate it, and we hope you bid again because we would still like to do business with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will go on next to item D2, budget hearing approval. It's an action item, and I believe we have CFO Landon.
Thank you, President Wagers and trustees. We're here again to discuss the budget for 21-22 school year and kind of bring you up to speed. We've talked about this for about, I think, the 3 or 4 last meetings, so I will try not to rehash all of the detail that we've been through previously because I know you've been through this a number of times, but tonight is the formal public hearing for the budget. And so I'm going to briefly go over that, and then at the end I will need a motion if you so agree to pass the budget going into the next fiscal year. So tonight I just want to do a brief overview of the budget, and this is more for the public. I know you're aware of this, but I feel like this is the public hearing and it's time to help the public understand a little bit. So of course we have 4 main funds within our district funds: the general fund, special revenue funds, debt service fund, and the capital project funds. And I'll talk about each of those. So the general fund is the main operating fund of the school district. When we get into the numbers, you'll see that's where the majority of the expenditures occur for the district. That's where most of the state funding comes into, as well as the property taxes. And then we budget those based on how the State Department of Education tells us in what categories. We have a certain type of coding structure that's set up for us to follow, and not only at the state level, but then it feeds up to the national level as well. So it's not some accounting structure I made up.
That's good.
I thought you might like that. So, and then in the special revenue funds, that's an area you'll see this year, there's a lot of change just because of all the federal funds that have come in. And we've talked a lot about those ESSER funds and those ARP funds previously, but there are other special revenue funds. And a thing about special revenue funds is those are funds that have to be accounted for separately in their own fund, either by law or it could be a federal program that's requiring that, or we specifically want to track some costs separately and keep them apart from our general fund. And as you know, we have a number of those types of funds, but the larger ones are our driver's education, food service, and JFK. Those are normally, those first three are tied to some fees. We charge fees to have those services. Food service this year is a little different in that the Biden administration has expanded and extended the universal feeding program, so we will not be charging for school lunch this upcoming year. On the next area, we have local programs and grants, and we do get some money from the city of Boise for some homeless funds, and we get some prevention money from the state for some drug-free counseling. Then the big one deals with our other federal funds. That's the Title I, Title II, 6B, which is your special education, and then, of course, the ESSER funds that we've talked a lot about. Again, if you recall, the ESSER, we had 3 grant awards awarded to us. The first one will expire in 9/30 of 2022. The next one will expire in 9/30 of 2023. And then the final one, which is the largest one, will expire in 9/30 of 2024. We are still waiting on some direction for the final grant, and you saw that in your budget, but it's about $33 million. We do know we have to spend 20% of that on learning loss, and so we're developing a plan that we will submit to the state and also have to publish for those funds. And then, of course, our debt service fund, as you know, we have bonds issued that the voters have approved, and then we go out and we issue tax annually to service those bonds, similar to your mortgage. We pay principal payments once a year, and we pay interest payments twice a year. We currently have about $167 million out in debt. We are authorized to have $1.5 billion in debt, so we're a long ways from our maximum limit, as you can see. Now, some districts, of course, bounce right up against that because they have such a small tax base, they bounce up against that limit. But in our case, we're well from that. Again, the payments are made annually in July and August. And then the rate, we anticipate the rate will go down this year to about .0059 or 59 cents per $1,000. Previously, we had targeted it to be about .0007 or 70 cents. With the growth in the market value, we've been able to reduce that rate.
Nancy, just a quick, so most taxing entities take them all that they can take. Is that true? As far as on the property taxes? And then I'm not trying to.
President Wagers, in some cases, I know that this year the city of Boise's published that they are going to take the maximum amount that they are entitled to request. I'm not sure about the other taxing districts. I know that during COVID, the start of COVID, we had a number of taxing districts that did not take the max. I have heard that they're starting to go back and get their max at this point.
Yeah, I just, it's just for me a clarification point for the public that we are not trying to take the max that we can take. We are still trying to be fiscally responsible with the public's dollars, even as we know the property taxes are going up.
Yes.
We realize that, and we've actually lowered our rate per 100,000.
Yep, and I'll show that in here a little bit farther, but
Thank you.
yes, definitely, we didn't ask for the maximum. And then the next area is the capital projects funds, and as you know, we have 2 funds within that category. One's our bond fund, and that's the money that the voters approved. We put that into a fund, and that's what we've been using to do our capital construction projects throughout the district. We had, I believe, 22 major capital projects. We're down to finishing up, I think we have like 2 left, and you'll see that later in the presentation, but it's pretty amazing that how quickly we've moved through those. So that's good to know. And then we also have the plant facility fund. And so in the plant facility fund, we get money from lottery, as well as we do transfers from the general fund into the plant fund. So those are a fund that we have on a regular basis, and we have that every year. So even when the bond fund goes away, you'll still have the plant facility fund to access for maintenance. And then here's an example of what we are planning to use for the plant facility projects this year. There's just a number of items out there. Tom and his crew, they work like crazy to try to get most of this done during the summer. We bid those early on in the spring so that we can have all the contractors up and ready to go the minute school gets out and get those people in to do this work. So I know the majority of these have been bid and they're up and running as we speak. And then finally, I did speak a little bit about the bond projects. We're finishing up on the rebuild of Valley View Elementary and also the addition and the remodel of Washington Elementary. You just heard the construction of the gym at Roosevelt Elementary as part of the bond proceeds. And then we are in the design work for the new school at Harris Ranch. And then we are going to plan on remodel and doing an addition to Longfellow Elementary. And I believe that's going to go out for bid in July. Is that right? In July. So we're moving along. Once you get through that list, the only thing that's left on the capital projects that we promised the voters is Collister. So you should be pretty proud that, we've worked through those 22 projects and we're still moving along. So here's the consolidated budget. So each of those categories, you can see I broke them out by the fund. Again, this is required by law, how I present those. So you've got the general fund, and as I mentioned, it's the largest fund of the district. It's $266.5 million. The special revenue fund is budgeted at $77 million. That's a huge increase because of those federal funds that came in. So you've seen a big influx of the federal dollars and about $45 million in that number. Then you've got the debt service fund, again, the tax receipts, and then you're turning around and paying your debt service. And then finally, the capital fund, which includes your bond fund and your plant facility fund. So you've got a total budget proposed of $392 million, which incorporates all of those funds. And again, we're going to bounce back to the general fund just to briefly kind of remind you of what we've already talked about previously. On the local revenue, the increase is about $7.5 million. That deals with property tax. The state revenue is about $4.4 million. That deals with like three main categories: some discretionary funding that they funded us for this year. They returned our leadership stipends that we talked about at the last board meeting, and then also some salary-based apportionment. I'm hoping in the following year, that salary-based apportionment will grow a little bit because our staff will be able to start moving on to that advanced placement career lane that we have not been able to do. And then the one thing I just wanted to remind you, because of those ESSER monies, we are charging the highest indirect rate that we can, the administrative rate. So that's why you see that other sources increased by 169%. That is a temporary revenue source. So you'll see throughout the budget when you go down, we've put that into a one-time capital expenditure plan so that we can use that for one-time types of expenditures, not build it in for ongoing, as that money will go away once the ESSER money goes away. The local revenue, again, I've talked a little bit about that. I wanted to point out that our market values are expected to increase by 20%. You did have the assessor come visit with you about the market values, and I'm sure you've all seen your assessment notices, so that 20% probably looks good to some of you right now compared to other people, so it's really high. We are thinking the market value will be about $33.2 billion. That number had changed because, as you know, the legislature approved to increase the homeowner's exemption. So that took away about $1.25 billion of our taxable value. And again, to what President Wagers was speaking to, luckily we had not taken all that we could because there was room to lose that taxable value and still be okay with not accessing all those taxes. And then here's the levy rate. As he mentioned earlier, the levy rate, we're planning it will go down to 0.0039 as the rate compared to 0.0042. That's about a 7.5% reduction in the rate from the prior year. And then, of course, if you look, interest earnings are down. Of course, there's no interest to be made right now in secure markets. So, with state support, just to do a quick reminder, the state mandated minimum teacher salary is $40,369. We are paying $42,061. Classified and administrative, the state did a base increase of those on 2%. They increased our discretionary funding by 2.3%. And then we are budgeting that we will be down in units, and we've talked about that. We budgeted down 30 units from the current year's budget value. So we're hoping that's close. If we go farther than that, I believe we'll fall into what's called protection, because I've looked at the numbers, and I think if we drop more in enrollment, we'll be protected under the Idaho law. They have a protection for if you drop too much in enrollment. So I feel pretty good about that 30-unit number. And then we did plan on getting an increase in our transportation reimbursement for about $200,000. And it's always based on this current year's expenditures. We won't know that until all the school districts submit their data, so it's an estimate at this point. And then I just wanted to briefly remind you of all of the other areas that we get money. What I refer to them as more legislative priorities or priorities that have been outlined in Idaho code. And so I'm not going to go through each of these. We've done that before, but I just want to remind you there's a number of items in addition to what we call the general support for attendance and salaries, but they also allocate a lot of money for us to use in specific areas. And so I've kind of outlined what those are and what we think the estimated revenue is associated with each of those. So I'll just let you look through those, and if you have specific questions, please stop me. And then again, some more areas of additional revenues that they earmarked for us specifically. It looks like I put leadership in there twice and didn't change one of them. I apologize.
Trustee Gregory.
So Nancy, when you look at those, that list of other funding, I think it's interesting to note that you can expend that money in personnel or in materials, and those things are tied to our strategic plan. So based on the feedback that our staff gets from the boots on the ground in our buildings, in terms of remediation or literacy, IT support, they're out there saying, how's it going? What do we need? And they're asking themselves those questions from the administrative point of view. How can we meet our goals more effectively and efficiently with this funding stream? And so it's not necessarily personnel, but oftentimes the best services are delivered by people.
Absolutely.
But sometimes you need supplies or a different strategy, et cetera. So this is something that I've seen evolve over the past 15 years, that we go back to our strategic plan and look at our goals and then say, how can we use the revenues that we have to support what we want to really accomplish?
Yeah, President Wagers, Trustee Gregory, absolutely. And this year especially, they've really carved out part of those leadership dollars to assign out to the buildings to come up with some ideas how they want to use some of those leadership dollars, specific from all the other areas that we've earmarked some of those leadership to assist with the priorities of the strategic plan. And I believe at the last meeting, we had laid out the leadership. That's one of your largest pockets. We'd laid each one of those categories out and tied it to the strategic plan. I believe Jody and Mark and those folks had done that for you. So I really appreciate that as well. And it's interesting with this money because it just, during when people got nervous about COVID, they went in here and started cutting some of these categories. They kept professional development cut and also some IT money. And they're telling us use your ESSER money to make up that shortfall this year. And they kind of promised that they would bring it back the following year. So hopefully they'll stay with their word and bring those funds back. And then again, if you look at the fund, at the budget, we're proposing to use $6.2 million to assist with balancing the budget. We do have a reserve requirement to set aside 5.5%. That is in addition. We've already got that set aside, so this 6.2 is above that amount. And then even with that, we should still have about 3.3 million left as undesignated. So our fund balance is well above the board required 5.5%. And then in the expenditures, again, the majority of our budget, as you mentioned, Trustee Gregory, is in salaries and benefits, of course. We're a people business, so about 83%, 84% of the budget is in salaries and benefits. And then your next big category is your purchase services, and we've talked about that. It's basically our transportation contract and our utilities and some maintenance contracts. And this is just another way to look at it again. We're required to break those expenditures down by the type of expenditure, so you can see that the majority of our money is spent on instruction, so that's direct instruction going directly to the child. Not a big change from last year. That number is almost identical to the percentage of last year. And then just to talk briefly about the general fund expenditures, as you know, each salary schedule was increased by 3.5%. We did a 0.5% one-time payment. I already mentioned the beginning salary, where we are. One thing that we are really striving to do is increase our classified salary schedule. We have the beginning box now at $13 an hour. Our goal is to get to $15 an hour, and we're hoping we can do that in the next couple of years. It's going to be a little bit of a lift, but we're hoping to do that. We know it's the right thing to do. We did also let people move on the salary schedules for step and credit movement. And then we did increase our sub pay, and that's part of the whole thing with the minimum pay as well. When we looked at how much a sub was making per hour, they will also be required eventually to get up to $15 an hour. So we increased them $10 a day as well. A couple other things to highlight: health insurance increased by 5%. That was the first increase we've had in a couple of years with health insurance, so we feel pretty good about that. Still, the health package is expensive. As you can see, it's about $8,800 per employee for full-time coverage. And then,
Nancy, just a quick on salaries. So last year we had no increase on base. Is that
correct.
and we did that because of uncertainty associated with COVID. So that's part of the reason why we have a higher increase this year, is because we had no increase on base for our staff. And mind you, we did give some bonuses associated with that, but they didn't have an increase on base, which
Yes.
I just want to be clear about that for the public.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. We did not have any base increase at all with the folks last year.
And President Wagers? Also, in terms of our classified and our substitutes, I think that, just the pressure that the market is experiencing is also driving these efforts to increase the base or increase the hourly wage there, because, we're competing with other Treasure Valley districts for subs, for bus drivers, and for classified, paraprofessionals, et cetera. And so we want to retain the ones we've trained.
Absolutely.
and this is a meaningful way to do it.
Yeah, thank President Wagers, Trustee Gregory, I believe we've really worked hard on our classified salary schedule. And when I go look at our peers, even I've looked at West Ada and what they're paying, I mean, we're still quite a bit higher than them at the classified level. So we know that it's important to compensate those people and that they're hard jobs to do. And so, our goal is to continue to work on that. And here's just a summary. You've seen this list a couple times. I think I've brought it to you twice now, but I just want to have this inside the packet for the public as well, kind of the big changes within the budget for this year, the kind of the ins and outs associated with that. I've gone through each of these with you previously, so I'm not going to go through them again unless you have specific questions about any of the items on this list of changes for the general fund. Okay, now we're into the all other funds, and this is just a summary. So you're looking at the summary of the special revenue funds, the debt service fund, and the capital funds. So those are all the other funds. So we just talked about the general fund, and now we're looking at all the other funds. And this is just kind of comparing where we were last year. And you look at the 21% increase, it's all in the federal dollars. You can see it there, that $48 million growth in federal. That's all the ESSER money and the ARP money. That's where you're seeing all that growth. And then just a reminder, we've talked about the ESSER money. We also are receiving some homeless money that will be good for 3 years. It's not going to be a lot of money, but it's about $65,000 that we were awarded, and we'll use that to help with homeless needs. We also received some special ed funding. Again, it's good for, I believe, they haven't said for sure, but I think through 9/30 of 2023. And we are being cautious with these funds because, as you know, they're one-time dollars, and so we're really being cautious about putting staff on these grants because we don't want to get in trouble in 2 or 3 years and have to figure out what to do with all these folks. So we've been very cautious. And then Title 6B and Title 4 and Title 1, not a lot of adjustments there, slightly reduced. So nothing big there. And then again, we did not do any fee increases for driver's ed, JFK, or school lunch this year. And then here's just a kind of a picture of the total budget. And then I did want to point something out here. It's just for your information. This is the state's general fund revenue. And you can kind of see the history of what's going on with the state's general fund. And what's really interesting is go look at 2021. So 2021, they had estimated before the session left that it was going to be $3.9 billion. Well, we have now heard that number is going to increase by about $500 to $600 million. So that number is going to go up quite a bit. And when I emailed my contact at DFM, He said they will also be adjusting the 2022 number in July, so those numbers will grow quite a bit. So you can look at how much they've grown just in a short time, even with the COVID and the situation, how much the state revenues have come up in such a short time, really. So just more history for you. The other thing I want to remind you of, in this budget, remember they said we could not touch the stabilization fund for fiscal year 21-22, that if the state estimated incorrectly and they are short on what they told us to budget, we have to use our ESSER money to make up the shortfall. So we have set aside about $2.6 million of that ESSER money because they will not let us go into the public schools stabilization fund. And then this is just statistics that I've given to you last time. I won't go through them again. And then per pupil, and then just the education level of our staff compared to some of our districts, and then also to the state. So with that, I will stand for any other questions.
One quick question, Nancy. How many of these have you done?
Do you have to make me say that out loud?
I do.
24.
24 budgets for the Boise School District.
Yeah.
So we are so lucky to have an expert, a statewide expert on this. And we greatly appreciate your expertise and your knowledge and doing accounting right, not just making it up.
You haven't been in my office very much, have you?
Oh, I've been in your office. Any questions for Nancy on this?
I just had President Wager's comment.
Trustee Gregory.
Nancy, I also just have to salute you for reaching out to your colleagues across the state during this past 18 months. I think that the collaboration that you guys have created has really stabilized a lot of places across the state and helped, folks work together for solutions that will benefit kids in districts that, are struggling to make these numbers work for their district. So thanks for collaborating within your association and reaching out and being a resource.
Perfect.
We're happy to have you do that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Work for us.
Thanks. The one thing I forgot to mention, I will be coming to you in July with a budget modification already. And the reason I say that is we've got some supply chain issues going on. And so we anticipated that we would have our furniture here for the new build for Valley View and Washington by June 30th. So it's inside the current year's budget. Those will not get here, so that I'm going to have to come to you and get spending authority from the fund balance to pay some of those bills. There's some other things that are happening as well, some technology items that are in the prior year's budget or this current year's budget that I'm going to need to come back and get spending authority for. So you'll see that in July, and I'll have that all detailed out for you. But
So one other thing with those 24 years, where does this rank as far as the hardest budget you've ever had to put together and timing-wise with what we've had to deal with?
President Wagers, I will say it's been really difficult in that the legislature was late getting out of town, a lot of unknowns with the federal dollars, and so that's been a hard part. And also just trying to get our team together. It's been really hard when you have to be 6 and 8 feet apart from each other and to really try to brainstorm and work and bring things together. So that's been difficult. But I'll tell you the thing that's been the craziest for me is I've never seen the magnitude of the federal money that's come in and all the different rules and regs that are tied to it and just trying to keep it all straight. That has been something.
Well, we appreciate having you here at this time.
President Wagers.
Trustee Greeley.
Thank you. Nancy, I just wanted to give you the kudos. You always do a masterful job on this, but especially as you're talking about the challenges with the special funding coming in and the timeframes and when you have to spend it. Just it's been really. I appreciate having such a depth of understanding of where that money is going and how cautious you are on the one-time expenditures and all that, and the focus on learning loss and how we're going to help students and all that. And then one other thing with the budget, it is so impressive to see the list going down so much on the bond projects, and Tom's here, and kudos to Tom and his team with that too. But boy, I think back to several years ago and the foresight of moving along with those because you were seeing the costs going up and really getting the best use out of the bond dollars that we could. So thank you.
Great. Okay, well, with that, I'll just need a motion and we can start the next year.
With modifications on the way. Trustee Gregory.
President Wagers, I move approval of the budget proposal before us for 2021-22.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Trustee Langley. Any discussion on the budget? This is our fifth meeting, or fourth or fifth meeting on the budget already. So we've had ample time to discuss, and Nancy's had to I know she's tired of my questions. But any other discussion from trustees? Seeing none, I would entertain a vote on the motion. All in favor of the 21-22 budget for the Boise School District, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you
Perfect.
for your
Thank
work,
you.
Nancy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to our next significant vote. I mean, we get very few useful things to do as trustees, is what I found. But today is the day we get to do all of them almost. And I think up next, maybe Mr. Jones, to go through the strategic plan for next year.
Thank you, trustees, President Wagers, trustees, and Stacy, if you would come up, we're kind of do this in tandem. This is kind of an exciting time to be able to share with you the highlights of the strategic plan. When we started in August and the challenges that we are facing, I'm a man that faith and hope are my core values, or at least part of my core values, but I have to admit, I thought about what the strategic plan might look like when I was back in August, and I was afraid that it just would have been a one-slide picture of a dumpster fire. But fortunately, for the most part, we've extinguished that, and we do have some exciting things to share with you. I know that I get teased for always joking about I got to circle the airport before I land the plane. I promise I'm not going to do that.
Tonight you have to land the plane.
But I am
been
going
part
to.
of my mentoring with him, just so you know.
Landing the plane.
So I'm not going to give you the airplane analogy, but I am going to pluck the chicken before I put it in the pot. So I've had the privilege of serving this district for 35 years. This was by far and away the most stressful year I ever had. It's by far and away the hardest I have ever worked. I've also would like to say that it's also the most proud that I've ever been. It's really important for everyone to understand how we came together as a district. And our parents need an incredible shout out for what they did and how they responded and how they supported. We have the best parents ever, and we are blessed to have them. And we look at our teachers that just absolutely incredibly stepped up. They are to be commended and honored for the great work that they did this year. And our administrators and all of our staff members of custodial and certified and everyone that works for the district did an incredible, incredible job, and I'm so proud of them. And most importantly, because this is why we're here, I am proud of our students and what they did to rise to the occasion. And as I share with you highlights, and I'll be going through the different goals, not everything's perfect in what we're going to have to share with you. There's parts that we have work to do, and we're going to do that. But we do have some things that we're going to show you that I hope that you'll reflect and also be proud of the job that we've done. So our first goal is quality teaching and learning. We touched this goal 121 times in our agenda items. And in the area of quality teaching and learning, we do have a literacy goal. And in our literacy goal, we basically look at various data points. We use the IRI, the iStation for our K-3. We also use the iStation for grades 4 through 6. And then we use the STAR testing in our 7th and 8th graders. And then we use the ISAT and the PSAT and the SAT for our high school people. So I'm going to kind of take you through some slides showing you the data points. Our goal is to show a 5% growth from fall to spring. We did that in many places. In some other areas, we didn't quite get where we wanted to be, so I'll show that with you. So first here is we look at the kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. This is our IRI. Again, for the most part, you see really good trend lines and you see a 5% growth. We are somewhat disappointed in the overall results for kindergarten. If this was taken over, as you can see, September, October, December, February, and then the May score, so you can see the progression. There's probably lots of ways that I could talk about kindergarten, about not making the progress in the up and down scores. We could probably talk a little bit about the fact that even just a kindergartner navigating remotely 5 different start days and handling all that. But what I'd rather tell you is this: we just think we also have some work to do in the area of kindergarten. And so we have a plan in place, and next year we'll be sharing with you many, many times the steps that we are taking, not only to help our kindergartners, but all of our students. So that's the results for our IRI. Then again, this is our 4th through 6th grade, and again, for the most part, meeting our goal of that. And again, when you consider a pandemic, we're pleased with the progress that our kids made this year. And then our 7th and 8th grade, our star growth, 7th was stagnant. A couple points about that when we look at growth. When our kids take tests, the benchmarks increase and get harder throughout the year. So when you see something that says 63% to 63%, that doesn't mean that growth was not made. It just means that at the higher benchmark, we didn't get as many kids to make that next step. And then when we look at our PSAT and our SAT, we look at the overall growth. And so we have gone, this is a cohort of our now 12th graders. So when they were 10th graders, 53% met the benchmark, and then in 11th grade, 63, and then 64% for their SAT benchmark. And you can see that the state was 57%. So we feel pretty good about that, again, about the work that we're making. Again, we realize we still have work to do, and we are not going to stop working and coming up with strategies and things that maximize learning for all of the students in this district. We're going to skip over to educational opportunity, and for that, I'm going to bring my partner in crime. I think I've used to, in the past, introduce her as Tracy. I would hope that after 4 years of working with her, at sometime 12-hour days, that I can get it right. So, Macy, you're up.
Thanks, Mark. So I would like to talk to you about Goal 2, which is our educational opportunity. And this goal appeared 113 times on our agendas this year. So first up, I want to talk to you guys about our AVID program. As you know, our AVID program is a nationally recognized program. Fairmont is a national demonstration school. We have been implementing AVID since 2006. So I want to just talk about this year's class. So of this year's class, we had 1,132 AVID graduates who 1,132 kids in the AVID elective this year. 96% of our AVID kids in 11 and 12 were enrolled in at least one AP course. 96% of our AVID kids earned a C or better in their core academic courses. This year we had 105 AVID seniors. Of that number, 50% of their parents did not go to college or university, but 91% of our graduates have applied and been accepted to college. 9% have other plans. They're military, missions, or trade school. And you have to think about these kids that are in our AVID program. It really is those kids that we are trying to gain those skills to be successful in college. So they learn organization, they learn determination, they learn grit, they learn taking a class that maybe is a stretch for them and getting a C and being proud of that, and taking another class and getting a B, and another class and getting an A. So it's when you look at these stats, it's truly amazing. We have our first AVID graduate who is going to Harvard, which is just incredible. And then there's a kind of a brag sheet of all the schools our AVID kids are either attending or have graduated from. So AVID is phenomenal. Our AP data, so you can see we go back from 2017-18 all the way up. We don't have this year's data. We will have it in July, and of course we'll get that to you when we have it. But you can see the number of AP exams is going up, as well as the number of students taking AP. Our GATE program, you can see we go back from 2018. We did have a bit of a dip this year in our GATE qualifications, which is kind of to be expected because it's hard to qualify kids remotely or when they were in virtual. We're very proud of our referrals from Title I schools. We've made a really strong effort of identifying kids that are GATE coming from our Title I schools because they might present a little bit differently. We have lots of English learners that are also qualifying for GATE, so we're very proud of that number. So our career tech, there's lots of information up here for you. One area I'd like you to really focus on is the number of industry certifications our kids got this year. We went up from 1141 to 1503. With, like Mark said, with everything we've had this year, we're very, very proud of that. We've talked about this in the past, the number of kids that are taking AP and are in our CTE program are increasing. So we're very proud of these numbers. You can see in 2020, we weren't able to get some of this data for you. Okay, so, I love pictures. So one thing we're super proud of is when we were able to come back, our Title I schools did after-school enrichment. So it was a voluntary program. We wanted kids to stay with their teachers. We provided busing, and almost all of our Title I schools participated. The top left is Taft because we also had to do parent engagement differently, right? Because we couldn't bring parents in. So we partnered at Taft with Pizza Hut. Families came, they got a pizza, and then they got a bag of activities to do at home. And then they did them, the kids came back and talked about it. So our schools were so incredibly creative of how they still continued parent involvement remotely and virtually. And the center is our student going to Harvard, Capital graduate. Another thing we're super proud of is our community schools logic model. So a year ago, we had a great, well, it's a little over a year ago, but we had a great planning session of how we were going to move forward with with community schools and our logic model. And then COVID happened. So that kind of came on the back burner. But then this spring, we were ready to bring our principals back and talk about a framework for our community schools. So we implemented the logic model. This is our district logic model for community schools. It's around our focus areas, which are academics, basic health services, student engagement, and community and family enrichment. So I just want to walk you through this. This is just a sample, but we have them for all 4 pillars. So as a district, we are expecting, you go to the outcomes and then you work backwards. So as a district, we are expecting around the lack of extended academic support, the extended day, right? So as a district, we want our community schools to have ongoing, before school or after school, extended academic day opportunities, right? So that's as a district. How will we know, right? Well, depends if they're focused on reading, if they're focused on math, but we're gonna have some pre-post, some indicators that we will see that this is successful. Who we're gonna reach will be targeted students. What we'll do is small group, and what we will invest as a district. So we will provide busing, we'll provide snacks, room, volunteers, whatever we need to. So we gave this for each focus area to the schools. Now the school is creating their own logic model. So I can give you an example. So Morley Nelson, late start, right? So they might say, hey, we've got 5th and 6th graders that come early. We're gonna do some before school tutoring. We've got 5th graders that are low in math. So we're gonna target those 5th graders in math. Maybe they ride the bus to Fairmont, they scoot across the lawn, they come in. Whitney says, nope, we're not gonna do that. Whitney says we're gonna do after school because we're a walking school, we don't need buses. So we're gonna target this, and we've got 3rd graders in reading. So we wanted each school to really look at their school, their data, and see how they can make this outcome work for them. And then we have, and I'm happy to share all the logic model, I just wanted to give you an example. Our English learners, I also thought this was fascinating. We've got 92 languages spoken in our district by our families. These are our top 10. It kind of changes. the number of languages spoken, and the top 5 usually are about the same, but there is some variable in there. I also just wanted to talk to you briefly about our new arrivals. So 1920, we had 111 brand new arrivals to the district for a total refugee count of 1145. This year, right, we were at 25. Not surprising, for a total of 943. So to put that in context, Biden has already said he wants his cap to be, I want to make sure, 125,000 refugees for the nation. Trump's was 11.8 thousand, and Reagan at the height was 217,000. So we're kind of, it just changes. So as a nation, Biden's cap is 125,000. What that means to Idaho, we're not sure. Both our refugee agencies are ready to accept refugees. We're a little concerned of housing, of where they're going to live, but they are ready to accept them. So I will keep you posted on these numbers.
Thanks, Lacey. So we're going to put 2 slides back to back that were done very purposely. So again, when you think about what you just saw with our EL learners, what an incredible job we do in this district and how proud we are of those students. And then we have continued to lead national merit semifinalists, and so you can see that we just continue to do really, really well. Obviously, in a pandemic, the numbers are down a little bit just because of less students and the different obstacles we had to overcome. What I'm going to do now is back it up with this slide. So when I got this job 4 years ago, I had the privilege of going to a STEP graduation, and it was the first STEP graduation that I'd ever been to. And just for anyone within ear of my voice that can hear this, so STEP is for our special needs kiddos that we educate till the age of 21. And for those trustees that have not been to a STEP graduation, you will get the opportunity next year. And I want to assure you, it will be one of the single best days of your life and one of the most proudest days you will serve as a trustee. And you'll want to bring your tissue. It is remarkable. And I think it's really important for the trustees to understand that we educate all kids in this district. So we have our national merit semifinalists, and we have our refugee kiddos, and we have our very special needs kids that go up to 21. That is awesome. What an incredible opportunity that we've been given to do that. And then our ability to respond and do the right thing for these kids. So then the next is hiring, training, and retaining the best staff. I will sum that up this way. Our training circled around getting kids to learn remotely. So 23,000 children learn how to get on Google and Seesaw and Google Meets, not always successfully at times, but we were able to do that. We got 1,600 teachers and another, I think, 2,400 or so ancillary staff that learned remotely. I'm proud to say that we got 7 board members to learn Zoom. The first night that we did that, not so much. It wasn't very successful. I would joke that the board members that were not part of the board might have observed that, but you didn't because we couldn't get anything to work. And so going back to the stressful times, we closed that board meeting because, again, I'm going to my dumpster fire analogy. But here's what we did. I think we stayed till 10 o'clock that night as a team. And we said we can and will do better. And again, not that it's perfect, but boy, we've come a long ways. By the way, I am so happy to see all of you. Like, this is like old school now. Like, people go, remember when we used to meet in person? This is really awesome. So we're really proud of what we've done in this area. School environment and safety, we touched this 140 times. So this is our second highest. It makes sense that we would touch this agenda item because we had a lot of work to do in the area of safety. And just a lot of things that were done throughout the year, but I would like to draw your attention. So, one of the things in the pandemic, we upgraded our HVAC systems, improved our airflow and filters, and these are things that are now we have permanently. So we do have, from a physical safety standpoint, we've really improved that physical safety within our classrooms and for all of our staff. So that's really nice that we continue to work on this. It was a big lift, and we had countless hours of training that we took our staff through on social distancing, and it was incredible. So really proud of the work that we've done in that area. And then in community relations and communications, this goal we touched 160 times. It's the goal that we touched most, and it makes sense. We had a lot of communicating to do to our public. I know we were talking, I think, and board members, you'll appreciate this. I forget what month it was, and probably Deputy Superintendent Roberts could say, but at one point, like 43 board meetings that you guys had been to, and so you are aware of that. But we had a lot of outreach. Just a couple more notes on that. So in the area of community relations and communications, all the different things that we accomplished. One thing that we did that I want to highlight is two-way text communication. And so we have the ability now through a couple different applications, so we can send and we can text a message to our parents in English. It goes to our parents that speak Swahili, converts it to Swahili. They respond back in Swahili and converts it back to English. And so what an awesome thing that we're able to continually reach out and make sure that we're doing everything we can to do to communicate to all of our stakeholders and all of our kiddos in this district. So quite an accomplishment in that area. Also, just even despite the fact that oftentimes our messaging had to be about COVID, as it should be. Our messaging was about the pandemic, as it should be. But in spite of that, we still had really good data in the area of our Everything's Possible marketing campaign, where we still had parents engaged and looking to things and responding to the great things that are being done, and parents talking about education, students talking about education, teachers talking about education. So the information even on this slide is encouraging that we still did not lose sight, and that all of our communication wasn't just pandemic. It was about other things that really, really matter in this district. And then finally with this, I just want to emphasize to the board, we have two focus areas next year in the area of literacy and the area of social and emotional safety. We have a lot of work to do this, but we are so excited. We had, back in February, we met as a cabinet and we started talking about what we needed to do to recover from COVID and get about doing the business that we were hired to do and why we are here. And it was awesome. And it was so encouraging for us to start talking about things of academic success as well as social and emotional success. And we brought in Jody Mills, and Jody Mills did a training back in February, and we met up at DTEC, and we had worked all day doing our jobs. I think the meeting started at 5, and I think it went till 8. We were like going, we did not want it to end. And we were so excited to start going back to those things. And we were talking about how can kids learn and what can we do to maximize achievement in this district and what can we do to support our kids. And it was so incredible to be part of that. And so you have a group of very tired directors. You have a group of very tired superintendency with our deputy and our superintendent and the administrators and the people in this room that have worked, all very, very tired. But you also have a group of people that are so excited for next year of what we are going to do in the area of literacy and social and emotional safety. So with that, I would entertain any other questions before we would have a motion to approve our strategic plan for next year.
Any questions for Bart or Stacy?
Well played.
President Gregory. And President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
I just wanted to point out to those who are a little bit new on the board that his impressive numbers about the number of times that things have been discussed in meetings is based on our Assembly platform that have we had it for 3 years now? Just one?
One full year of implementation.
Oh my goodness, that's tremendous, and it's just really empowering in terms of tracking the work that we do and tying it to our strategic plan and creating a pathway of evidence that we're doing our jobs. and that you guys are doing your jobs. And it's especially noteworthy that we've addressed safety so many times. And, you know, in 40 meetings, and I don't know, I hope that counts all the times you guys have done it without us, but that's a primary goal of ours. And I think that our public respects that we are going to put the safety of their children as a high priority, so thank you.
Any other questions for Mark or Stacy?
President Wagers.
Trustee Greeley.
Thank you, President Wagers. So, Mark, I appreciate just even, and Stacy, appreciate getting just going back over this again. We've touched it so many times, it feels like during the year. But for the other trustees that may not realize this yet, Mark started this year showing up to all committee meetings, correct? To ensure that every trustee understands the strategic plan and that we are constantly making sure that that we're using it as our guiding document. So appreciate that.
There was actually the latter part of the year, but I love that I get invited to all the meetings, and it just helps me to see what people are doing and keep us on the straight and narrow.
President Wagers.
Superintendent Dennis.
Thank you. Mark, can you talk a little bit about the impact that this year had on our strategic plan, or on the plan on our process for developing our strategic plan? Can you talk a little bit about what you think the impact has been?
President Wagers, trustees, Superintendent Dennis. Yeah, so 2 words would come to mind when I look at our response to this incredible year in the strategic plan, and one is focus, and the other is flexibility. So and at first those could appear to be contrasting, but they actually are the perfect pair of words. So what the strategic plan did for us is it caused us to be focused. So whenever we were dealing with a situation and we weren't sure how to respond or what the response would be, we always would go back to the strategic plan and say, what does our strategic plan say? Because it's well written. And we wanted to make sure that when we were making decisions, it aligned to the strategic plan. But secondly, we also learned we had to be flexible, and we had to learn to pivot, and we had to learn to adapt. And so we might come into a certain meeting and think we're going to talk about a particular area of the strategic plan, and it could also like, nope, we're still going to talk about the strategic plan, but it's going to be in now a different goal. And so we had to learn to be flexible about that. And I think those are 2 things that we can continue and will continue to use.
So I just have a couple things to say. One is I'm glad we show student achievement even when it's not where we want it to be, and we continue to say the same matrix to the trustees on a continuous basis. I mean, I'm not happy where kindergartners are. You're not happy where kindergartners are, but we admit that and we move forward, and it gives us a chance to say that's why we use data. I mean, and we want consistent, good data to use so we can find what areas we need to improve on. But we also find the areas we need to continue to, that we're happy about, but we continue to improve on those as well. So thank you for, letting us know. I'm excited to see, I know there'll be more specific plans associated with that coming June, July, August. I mean, we're in June, but July, August, September, and how we attack those literacy issues. And that's important to me as a trustee, that's because when it comes down to it, it is student achievement for us. We want students to graduate and graduate well. One other thing you touched on, Mark, was we have asked so much from so many people in our community. I mean, we've asked a lot from the community. We've asked our staff. You guys have just killed yourself above and beyond all the time. We've asked even more from our families. I mean, moms and dads trying to figure out how to navigate, life, and their students frustrated. And we've asked even more from students because they've had to learn different ways. And our strategic plan has allowed for that. And I appreciate the flexibility of that document, because if we didn't have a good document to base that on, this year would have been 20 times as hard as it was. But like you said, we went back and leaned on that document over and over and over again. And that's why this is one of the most important things that we do is, we don't make that many changes to it, but it's because it's an ongoing living document that we look at all the time. And Mark, I know you live and breathe this, and I appreciate your work on it on a regular basis. Any other comments from trustees? Okay, I would entertain a motion for the
President Wagers,
trustee Greeley.
I move approval of the 2021-22 strategic plan.
Do I hear a second? Second, trustee Haas. Any discussion on the strategic plan? I know, once again, this is another one that we've had probably 4 or 5 meetings on, and it is a continuous thing for us, as you can see by the number of times it's touched by the agenda items. But any discussion from trustees? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion. Oh, we already got a motion. How about do you have a vote?
Yes, let's vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Bart and Stacy. We have some other business, it turns out, and that means I think Director Anderson gets to come visit us.
Good evening. I just have one policy up for second reading, policy 3325, and there have not been any changes since you saw it up for first read.
Okay, so policy 2335, I would entertain a motion. Oh, I said the 3325. I would entertain a motion on that policy. Trustee Gregory?
I move approval of policy 3325 as outlined in enclosure 18.
Is there a second? Second. Effective.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think she said effective July 1st. Seconded by trustee Esty. I heard her before, trustee Greeley. Any discussion on this policy? Once again, we've had our second chance to review it. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you,
Thank
Director
you.
Anderson.
Thank
Not
you.
trustee yet, but maybe someday.
Oh, no, thank you.
Oh, it's really fun. So our next thing, actually, we'll be heading into executive session. So I'll need a motion. So basically, we'll be going into executive session. I don't know when we'll be coming out. So we'll be having our private discussions on employee section A. That's what I know. Trustee Greeley.
President Wagers, I move that we go into executive session according to Idaho Code 74206-1A.
Is there a second? Second from trustee Esty. Clerk Mass, will you do a roll call vote to enter executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
Trustee Langley? Aye. Trustee Greeley? Aye. Trustee Gregory?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Clerk Mass. So we'll go into executive session. We'll have to have everybody who's not part of the executive session leave the room. We will close the doors at that point. We'll reopen them when we're out of executive session, and then we will take up, we do have some action items probably coming from executive session. Once again, I don't know how long it'll be, but you're definitely welcome to wait, and we will see everybody after that. We'll recess for about 5 minutes while we exit the room. now go to, I would actually entertain a motion on the superintendent contract.
President Wagers.
Trustee Greeley.
I motion to approve extending the superintendent contract for a year with the continuation of the former terms.
Do I have a second? Second from Trustee Esty. Discussion. Trustee Gregory.
So I would like to take this opportunity to express support for the superintendent and specifically for the work that we saw performed this past year that really highlighted in my mind the skill set that he brought and the abilities, the commitment that he made to us as a board to be upfront, to be transparent with us, to include us in vital discussions, and to do what he said he'd do, which would be lead this district. And he made a commitment to do that. And I think that one of the other skill sets that came up continually in the evaluation process was his commitment to building and working as a team, which has been evident in this past year. And, you know, what a year to become superintendent. You know, he was in the saddle for, what, 7 months?
The whole 6 months of my vast experience.
Yes. And he rallied his troops around him, and that takes a leader who is able to do that with such evident cohesion that we experienced in this district. And I also need to salute him for his interaction with the board. I think he managed us cats really well. and I appreciated working with him and having his a willingness to communicate with us and take our calls and assuage our fears and, you know, express confidence and ask for our trust, which based on his performance was easy to give with confidence because of the road that we had traveled together. So I wanted to just assure the public that we have been through an evaluation process, and he performed satisfactorily in all areas, and based on that, I intend to support the motion.
Thank you, Trustee Gregory.
President Wagers.
Trustee Greeley.
Well, Nancy really hit on many of the things that I was thinking about also, but one of the things that came to mind was shortly after Superintendent Dennis became superintendent, we hit the pandemic, and I just remember thinking, I am so grateful that you have already developed such a trust amongst your team, the employees, because it was so crucial at that point. And throughout the year, you continue to really grow that trust with everybody, with parents, with us. And I think the biggest thing to me was during such a difficult year, it's one thing to lead when things are easy, but when things are really difficult, you really see people's strengths and weaknesses, and boy, do we see the leadership in you. So I'm very grateful for your continual leadership and the work you've done with all of us.
Any other comments from trustees? Because you know I'm going to talk. Superintendent Dennis, I mean, I think the key thing for me with you is teamwork. And you've created a team. You often take a backseat, sometimes more than I would like. You make direct superintendent and Deputy Superintendent Roberts. But that grows her. And the rest of your team has grown through this process. And if you didn't have a strong team, this would have been an impossible year. And you made the impossible possible between all of you. So, you know, it's a referendum on you, but it's also a referendum on all the work that all of you did. So thank you for that. You've earned another year. I don't know if you want another year, but you've earned one from at least my perspective. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work of your team as well. Any other comments from trustees? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and take a vote, and that's a vote to extend your contract by another year, so that will make it another, right, currently it's ending it as a 2-year contract. It will now be a 3-year contract, and it will also increase by the amount negotiated. So I guess we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you for your work.
President Wagers.
Superintendent Dennis.
First of all, thank you all. Those are very kind words. But I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with that kind of praise when I know that the work that these guys do. So thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it. I do want another year, just so you know. I do enjoy this job, but it's because of the people. So thanks.
Well, here's to a year of student achievement and non-worrying about not spending near as much time on COVID. Now we're on to trustee superintendent comments. Anybody have things they need to talk about, chat about? Trustee Oppenheimer's been awfully quiet.
We didn't have students here to make it fun.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not hearing much, so I guess I'd entertain a motion. Trustee Gregory.
I move to adjourn.
Second from Trustee Haas. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Have a great evening, everybody.